Okay, it being 6 o'clock, I'm going to call this meeting of May 6, 2024 of the Select Board. And, excuse me? I just want to remind everybody that Chelmsford Telemedia is broadcasting this meeting live and also taping it for later rebroadcast. And if you join me now in the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, thank you. So we have several public service announcements, starting with a proclamation for National Public Works Week, and I know there's somebody here to accept that proclamation for us this evening. So if you want to come up while we read it, and you can give it to, no, and you can give it to Christine when you're done reading it, the official one.
I read it. Oh, well, it's here. Can I read it from here? The Town of Chelmsford proclamation in celebration of National Public Works Week. Whereas public works professionals focus on infrastructure, facilities, and services that are of vital importance to sustainable and resilient communities and to the public health, high quality of life, and well-being of the people of Chelmsford, Massachusetts. And whereas these infrastructures, facilities, and services could not be provided without the dedicated efforts of public works professionals who are engineers, managers, and employees at all levels of government and the private sector, who are responsible for rebuilding, improving, and protecting our nation's transportation, water supply, water treatment, and solid waste systems, public buildings, and other structures and facilities essential for our residents. And whereas it is in the public interest for the residents, civic leaders, and children in Chelmsford, Massachusetts to gain knowledge of and maintain an ongoing interest and understanding of the importance of public works and public works programs in their respective communities. And whereas the year 2024 marks the 64th Annual National Public Works Week, sponsored by the American Public Works Association, Canadian Public Works Association, be it now resolved, we, the Chelmsford Select Board, do hereby designate the week May 19th to 25th, 2024, as National Public Works Week. We urge all residents to join with representatives of the American Public Works Association and government agencies in activities, events, and ceremonies designed to pay tribute to our public works professionals, engineers, managers, and employees, and to recognize the substantial contributions they make to protecting our national health, safety, and advancing quality of life for all, presented this 6th day of May, 2024. To Christine Clancy,
Oh,
PW Director.
Thank you. I just wanted to say thank you for this proclamation. I also just wanted to make an announcement. So that week we are kicking off on May 18th for a Touch a Truck event. And before, I also have with me TJ Swizzler of our Highway Department. We are also doing a food drive that we'll be collecting food that week, and we have locations around town. He can speak a little bit about to it. But we're excited for that week. We have some events planned in-house and as part of the community with that open house and also the food drive.
Good evening, thank you. My name is TJ Swizzler. I'm a truck driver for the Chelmsford Highway Department. And just like briefly talk about a food drive that we're having currently between now and May 18th. Back over the winter, we were discussing some ways to give back to the community. And we decided that maybe a food drive with all donations going to the Chelmsford Food Pantry would be a great idea. So we sat down with Joe Erickson and Christine Clancy. And with their help, we decided that maybe we could incorporate the food drive with the open house that we're having this month. So I'd like to just talk about a couple things that we have going. Currently, we have over 16 locations in town with collection bins. We have them at Town Hall, all the fire stations, the police station, Adams Library, the cemetery department, and the DPW. And we're looking for donations from residents and town employees. Also, on May 17th, we'll be collecting food outside a Market Basket on Chelmsford Street between the hours of 8 a.m. and 3 p.m. And lastly, the main event will be our open house between 10 a.m. and 3 p.m. at DPW headquarters on Alpha Road. And during this time, we're hoping that any student in town that brings a donation for the food pantry will be entered into a raffle, and we will be raffling that off for a ride to school in a DPW vehicle. And we're excited about that to get the children involved as well. So we're hoping everybody can come out to our open house, bring some donations for the food pantry. And we'd like to thank the Select Board, Town Manager Paul Cohen, and Christine Clancy for getting this food drive in place. Thank you.
What is the date of that open house again?
It is May 18th, and it'll be at 9 Alpha Road between the hours of 10 a.m. and 3 p.m.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So the child that wins the raffle to get the ride to school, do they get to pick the vehicle?
Well, it's actually, it's called a DPW parade.
Oh.
There's requirements for them to be in seat belts, so we're coordinating with police and fire. So it'll be police, fire, and then DPW dump truck that will be involved. So it'll be a DPW parade, and we're coordinating whether it be police or fire.
Okay.
But I think
Be
it'll be
impressive.
a
You can't
fun
put 'em in the front
opportunity for
seat.
someone.
That's the problem.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next in public servants announcements, we have an announcement from the Chelmsford Police Department. The Chelmsford Police Department is to recognize National Police Week and Law Enforcement Officer Memorial Day on May 15th, 2024. In 1962, President John F. Kennedy signed into law the designation of May 15th each year as National Peace Officer Memorial Day, and the calendar week in which that day falls as National Police Week. This week pays tribute to local, state, and federal police officers who have died or who have been disabled in the line of duty. We also take this time to remember Chelmsford's own Donald Adams, who was killed in the line of duty in 1927. Constable Adams was 27 years old when he went on a trolley to arrest a suspect and was shot and killed. Constable Donald Adams' bravery in going after an armed suspect will not be forgotten. Also mentioned in the flyer are 3 other officers who died suffering heart attacks in the line of duty: Winslow P. George, Ralph Hoslander, and John P. Campbell. In observance of National Police Week, the Chelmsford Police Department will hold a Law Enforcement Memorial Day ceremony at the Forefathers Cemetery on Wednesday, May 15th at 11 a.m. And during the ceremony, a wreath will be laid at the grave sites of Constable Adams to honor those officers who have made the ultimate sacrifice. We will also place wreaths at the graves of Winslow P. George, Ralph Hoslander, and John P. Campbell. Next, we have an announcement from the Chelmsford Board of Health announcing the Wellness from Within After School Club, open to all McCarthy Middle School students. It will be May 7th and May 21st from 2:30 to 3:30 p.m. And it says, come join us as we learn and practice self-acceptance, mindfulness, and other strategies that will help you develop a healthier mind and a healthier you. If you have any questions, you can call 978-250-5241. Also from the Board of Health, we have an announcement about a free 4-week meditation series with instructor Chris Connolly. And that is at the North Chelmsford Community Center at 31 Princeton Street on the 2nd floor. It's 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. every Wednesday starting May 1st through May 22nd. And it looks like you are required to register. If you have questions, again, you can call the Health Department, 978-250-5241. This is an announcement regarding the Greater Lowell Digital Equity Plan, Strategy Charret. NEMCOG, the regional planning agency for communities in northern Middlesex County, is working on a plan to improve residents' access to the internet, technological devices like smartphones and computers, and education about how to use these tools. This is located at the Chelmsford Senior Center, 75 Groton Road, May 9th from 5 to 7 p.m. And you can learn more at NMCOG, that's nemcog.org/digital equity. Another announcement from the Chelmsford Health Department, Caregiver Series, Understanding the Stress Associated with Caring for Children with Significant Needs. The series starts Thursday, May 9th. It's a free series to discuss the stress associated with caring for children with mental health disorders and disabilities. This group ensures that individuals can share their thoughts, feelings, and experiences without fear of judgment or breach of privacy. Children are welcome. It is going to be held May 9th, May 16th, May 23rd, and May 30th at the Chelmsford Public Library in the McCarthy Meeting Room from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. Also from the Chelmsford Health Department, let's talk about mental health, community wellness series, supporting the well-being of the LGBTQIA and youth. Designed for youth and adult community members, this supportive, interactive, and engaging program invites participants to learn more about accessible actions they can take to be effective allies and create a more compassionate and inclusive community. This is being held on Tuesday, May 21st from 6:30 to 8 p.m. at the Chelmsford Public Library. And more information can be found with the Health Department. Next, we have an announcement about the Memorial Day observance and Veterans Graveside flags. Chelmsford will observe Memorial Day on Monday, May 27th in North Chelmsford with American Legion Post 313 as the host veterans organization. There will be a parade, and it will start promptly at 10 a.m. from the American Legion Post at 90 Groton Road and proceed down Groton Road to Vinyl Square. Everyone is welcome, and there will be a program immediately following the parade at Vinyl Square. Please note that flags will be placed on veterans' graves at our 6 Chelmsford public cemeteries prior to Memorial Day. We will start on the 18th with the Scout volunteers at Pine Ridge Cemetery, and there will be 2,000 marked veteran graves. If you have any questions about the parade or placement of graveside flags, please call the Veterans Office at 978-250-5238. And last, we have another announcement from the Chelmsford Health Department, free youth mental health first aid training presented by the Chelmsford Health Department. This is May 30th from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. at the Chelmsford Town Hall, the Fire Training Room at 50 Billerica Road. It's for parents, educators, and other community members, and it informs adults about common mental health concerns among youth. To register for questions, you can contact Taryn Angel, 978-250-5241. That's it.
Thank you. So before we get to public input, if there's anybody here for 243 Riverneck Road, the 40B local initiative project, that we will not be taking any testimony on that project tonight. It will be discontinued until June 24th. So just so you don't have to wait till we get to that on the agenda. So next is public input. If anybody has anything they'd like to talk to the board about this evening.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Vivian Merrill. I'm with the Dog Park Advisory Committee. I know later on in your agenda you have a discussion about 54 Richardson Road. The dog park is actually at 52 Richardson Road and has been part of this study all along. And unfortunately, I got a meeting next door, so I won't be here for that presentation. But from what I was able to gather from the presentation, it sounds like conditions are getting much better in the dog park area, and I'm just hoping that we'll be able to use our irrigation soon, because we'd like to grow some grass over there again and kind of cut down on the mud and the dust over there. Traditionally, I usually will email with Christine Clancy, and she's been fabulous, helping us out over there. I'm going to guess that I can probably keep doing that. And that was all I wanted to say.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else for public input?
No one online.
Okay. All right, so next we'll go to committee vacancies.
So committee vacancies as of May 6th. We have one 3-year term on the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee. The Conservation Commission has one unexpired 3-year term. The Commission on Disabilities has 2 unexpired 3-year terms. The Community Action Program Committee has 1 unexpired 3-year term. The Cultural Council has 1 3-year term. The Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee has 1 3-year term available. The Historic District Commission has an associate member position available. The Holiday Decorating Committee has 3 unexpired 1-year terms open. The Parade Committee, all applicants are welcome. Public Records Advisory Committee has 1 unexpired term. The Roberts Field Advisory Committee has 2 unexpired terms, and the Recycling Committee has 1 unexpired term open. If you are interested in serving on a town board or committee, please complete an online application on the town website or contact the town manager's office at 978-250-5202.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we have a couple public hearings this evening. First of all, we have a wine and malt beverages restaurant license being requested for Doty's Diner. I see we have the applicant and his attorney here.
Right here.
Thank you.
Straight.
Good evening, members of the board, Mr. Town Manager. For the record, Douglas Hausler representing the applicant, Mr. Paul Doty.
Doug, can you just push the mic towards you? Thank you.
Towards there?
Yeah,
Is
that's
that better?
good. Thank you. That's better, yeah.
Okay. Usually people can hear me, Paul.
Real people at home.
We have filed on behalf of the applicant all the required paperwork. I've coordinated with the town manager's office. We believe we filled out everything. I have with me tonight the check for the cost of the publications, and we filed the required fee with the ABCC this afternoon, so all payments are in order. Mr. Doty is looking to get a beer and wine license at his establishment on Summer Street. The hours are reflected in the application, and he'll be the manager of record. I think we've tried to lay it out very carefully. We gave you the floor plan of the diner, the hours of operation, when this would be available, which days of the week. And I believe basically we're here to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay, does anybody on the board have any questions about this application?
Just an administrative one. Paul, you have a butter notice green slips?
Yes, yeah.
You have all that?
Okay, any other questions? I just have a question about experience, as far as whoever will be serving the beer and wine.
Mr.
Can you
Doty-
s- I'm a little hard of hearing, I'm
He's hard of
sorry.
hearing. He's just saying that he'll be the manager,
Uh-huh.
and they want to know about your relevant experience on.
Oh,
You've asked for it, Pat.
okay. It goes back
I
a
didn't
long
hear.
way, if you want. In Chelmsford alone, way back in the 80s, I worked as the manager of Ceros, which was a very popular thing, so I handled the rest. Then after that period of time, I managed Vincenzo's for 12 years with the liquor and during that other period of time, I worked at various restaurants. At Paul's in Westford, we didn't have a beer and wine license, but the town allowed us to bring your own beer there, and that worked out quite well for the customers. We did special events, St. Patrick's Day, Valentine's Day, so forth and so on. Now, this was an idea that came about when I decided to increase our hours at nighttime to do real comfort food and things of that nature. And a lot of my customers mentioned, are you going to do anything about a beer or wine license or a liquor license? And it gave me an idea. I thought about it for a period of time, and I decided to go forward with it. So anyways, I think it's a great thing for the diner to have something like that, and especially with the type of food that we're going to be serving. And even maybe on a Sunday, maybe have a champagne with orange juice and for breakfast, and with your beautiful omelet, lobster omelet or anything like that. But anyways, I want to thank the board for going forward, and hopefully give us the license to go forward to the ABC. I appreciate that very much. And it's a pleasure to work in Chelmsford. I was 18 years in Westford. I felt like I was in an island somewhere else, but it was nice to be home. I live in Chelmsford. I want to work hard for the people of Chelmsford and make sure they get the best out of me.
Okay, Paul, you've described a lot of experience now. Do you have a current TIPS certificate?
Yes, I do.
Okay, all right. This is a public hearing. Is there anybody here that would like to speak either for or against, or have any questions about this application?
No
Anybody?
one online. No.
Okay. Take a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
Second?
Okay. We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Any other last questions from the board?
Just to reconfirm, the hours are as stated in the application, correct?
Yes.
Okay. You just mentioned hours, and I wasn't sure if you were looking to expand
As set
those.
forth in the application.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. No other questions? We'll take a motion.
I will make a motion to approve the wine and malt beverages restaurant license for Jody's Diner, Inc. at 7 Summer Street, Unit 25, as presented.
Second?
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
All done.
Congratulations. Good luck.
Thank you very much.
Thank you
Hope
all
to
very
see you at the
much.
restaurant.
Yeah.
Thank you again.
Okay, our next public hearing is for a transfer of an all alcohol license for Nobo Restaurant. So
Good
if you
evening,
want-
everyone. My name is Chris Coleman. I'm here on behalf of the applicant. Jeff Chen is here with me here. He's going to be the proposed manager. The location we're talking about is 18 Boston Road, Suite 600. The location has approximately 4,800 square feet. It's got 140 seats. 20 of them are in the lounge. There's proposed hours. I believe they're the same as the old establishment that was there, but they are at Monday through Thursday, 11:30 a.m. to 10 p.m., Friday to Saturday, 11:30 a.m. to 11 p.m., and then Sunday, 12 noon to 10 p.m. Still Asian cuisine, sushi involved as well. There's no alterations proposed. There'll be some spruce up, but there's not going to be any significant structural changes there or the layout. Mr. Chen has excellent restaurant experience. Currently, he's the sushi bar operator at Sea Level in Newburyport, but prior to that, the year before that, he was the co-owner of the Fuchi restaurant in Westford, and for 6 years prior to that, he was an owner at Sushi Time in Plastow, New Hampshire. He is TIPS trained, he's a U.S. citizen, and he will be spending more than 40 hours a week there. We also have an entertainment license on the agenda. It's really just radio background music and 2 televisions, and that's pretty much it. So we'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Okay. Anyone on the board have any questions about this application?
So this is a change in ownership of the restaurant?
Yes. The former owners were U Restaurant Group Corp.
Thank you.
It's a transfer.
Okay, this is a public hearing. Is there anybody here that has any questions or wants to make any statements for or against this change of license? Okay, anybody
No one
else?
on Zoom either.
Okay. I'll take a motion and close the public hearing.
Make a motion to close the public hearing.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Okay, last chance. Anybody else on the board have any questions, concerns?
So are we, the entertainment license goes with,
Yes.
it's all this all together?
Yes.
Okay. We don't need to do both? We
You
don't need to do
can
them
just
separately?
Do the
It's all
all
listed as
alcohol
one.
restaurant and live entertainment license. And non-live entertainment license.
Good.
Yep.
I'll make a motion to approve the transfer of the all alcoholic beverages restaurant license for Ukanobo Inc. doing business as Nova Restaurant from U Restaurant Group Corporation. As presented?
That'll work.
Second.
Is that okay?
And, yeah, and include the entertainment license.
And that's to include the all alcohol common victular and non-live entertainment license.
Okay.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, congratulations.
Thank you all. Have a nice
Good luck.
evening.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you.
Where's he going? It's not time yet.
Okay, and our last public hearing has to do with the local initiative project that I mentioned earlier at 243 Riverneck Road. The applicant has requested that the hearing be continued to our meeting on June 24th, so we won't take any testimony this evening and just continue it. So if we could have a motion to that effect.
I'll make a motion to continue the local initiative project for the proposed affordable housing project at 243 Riverneck Road.
To
To be continued to June 24th, 2024.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Okay. So George, Christina, can you tell George he can come back?
I think he meant to leave for Richardson Road.
Okay, we have a couple announcements about new license regulations, and I think Christina Bruce is going to explain those to us.
Good evening, members of the board. For the record, I'm Christina Bruce, Support Services Manager for the town of Chelmsford. And I just wanted to let you know about new legislation signed into law by Governor Maura Healey on April 30th. These both pertain to making permanent previously temporary provisions that were put in place during COVID-19. The first is related to the sale of mixed drinks for off-premises consumption by establishments that are licensed for all alcoholic beverages on premises consumption. So during the pandemic, this provision was put into place to allow the sale of mixed drinks. So someone in conjunction with the sale of food for takeout or delivery could be sold a mixed drink. And this was just made permanent. The provision, it can only go until midnight or the hour of closing, whichever is earlier. This cannot be for the sale of wine or beer. This is for mixed drinks only. So this would not apply to our wine and malt beverages licensees. If the wine or beer is mixed into a cocktail and it is mixed on site, then it can be included. But it can't be by itself, and it can't be in a pre-made mixed sangria or prepackaged, something like that. The only difference that I find in the permanent provision compared to the temporary provision, the state issues transportation permits. They didn't require a transportation permit for this delivery of alcohol during the pandemic. Now, if the restaurant uses its own vehicles or its employees' vehicles to deliver alcohol with takeout, they will need to get licenses for those vehicles, transportation permits for those vehicles. That doesn't go through the town. That's all just directly with the state, and the licensees have been made aware of that. So that's the mixed drinks. Are there any questions about that one?
So have the restaurants been notified of this change? They
Yes.
have?
Yep.
Okay.
I did send them. I sent them an email notifying them about the legislation, and then I sent them another email when I noticed that difference. It is in the advisory, which they all would have received, but it seemed worth pointing out.
Okay.
The second change is related to the approval of the addition of or the expansion to outdoor service of alcohol for existing licensed premises. So that used to require local approval, then ABCC approval, with a full process prescribed by the ABCC that involved a butter notification advertisement in the newspaper. During the pandemic, they allowed for local approval only without going through a public hearing and notice process, and they have now made that permanent. That does not pertain to amendments, alterations of the premises indoors. This is only related to outdoor seating. So if you have a restaurant that already has approved permanent outdoor seating, like Max and Leo's, but they want to add some extra in the parking lot like they did during the pandemic, they now can apply for one time to make that permanent with the select board, no ABCC approval needed. The biggest takeaway here is that the legislation requires that this board must establish a process for approving these requests. So the board will have to decide how it wants to proceed with these requests. Previously, a lot of that process was dictated by the statute and by the ABCC process. We always would have our local amendment fee, our own internal departmental review. We would obviously require the proposed plan so the board could see what it is they were asking for. But most of what was done previously, in addition to that, was required by the ABCC, a financial statement, a vote by the corporate entity, supporting financial records, the lease showing their right to occupy, and most importantly, the abutter notification and the advertisement. So that is no longer required by the state. So it's now up to the board what, if any, of those you'll require. And once the board goes through a process to make that determination, we can then notify our licensees.
So the restaurants that have been doing this during COVID, are they doing it this summer, this season that you're aware of, any of them? Or?
No, those temporary provisions expired.
Okay.
So now we're under this new process. The only establishment that took advantage of the temporary provision in the last couple of years was Max and Leo's. They have that, the permanent patio area,
Right.
which is on their permanent license. And then they would expand using a temporary license into the parking area. So last year, they added a couple of picnic tables. They may be interested in continuing that on a seasonal basis. We'll see.
But
Okay.
they'll have to go through whatever process we determine first.
Correct.
If we just carry over what we were applying from the ABCC, what would that look like?
So what we were doing was just our internal departmental review.
Yeah.
And then we weren't even coming to the select board. The select board did take a vote early on in the pandemic to allow just administrative approval. So,
Okay, I see.
yep, so if we continued that, it wouldn't even come to the board. It would just be an administrative review.
And so the rationale, as I recall, we were already thoroughly scrubbing the alcohol license.
So
Through-
at this
through
point,
our
though, we
process.
couldn't continue that way because this does require approval by the local licensing authority, which is the select board.
Okay.
So are we talking about just the outdoor seating is the only thing that we need to,
And
Form
the to-go,
policy on.
or?
No,
So the to-go alcohol, there's no action required by the board.
Okay, just the
So
outdoor
so for the outdoor seating, approval of new and expanded outdoor seating, the action required soon by the board would be to determine the process going forward for approval of these requests.
And so what you did for the outdoor seating was just the departmental reviews? And then
Yes,
applied your judgment based on that?
yes. So the fire department, the
Right.
building department, the police, and DPW would all do a review. Community development would take a look.
Right, and they do have, the last page is the guidelines that they would be required to follow.
So the email that the ABCC sent about the outdoor seating guidelines approved by the ABCC in 2022, their email said that it is their hope that these will serve as guidance for the board. It doesn't sound like that is something that is going to be required. For instance, I think the first thing in that guidance talks about the requirement of a public hearing, and that would no longer be required. Yeah, that number one of those guidelines talks about following the process provided in Mass General Law, Chapter 138, for application and approval. So I think the intention at this point is for that to be a guideline for the board. And that is, the board has looked at that for previous applications for outdoor seating, for permanent outdoor seating.
Okay, any thoughts about how we want to move forward with this? Go ahead.
I mean, I don't know if we need to reinvent a process. I think if the departmental reviews and attaching some guidelines was working before, now we have to add the step of bringing it to the board, but I'm very comfortable with, if the town manager's office is comfortable with how it was working, I'm comfortable just repeating that.
Well, according to what Christina said, they wouldn't even have to bring it to the board if we're okay with them making that decision. And then if there's a
Oh,
complaint.
we can decide, I thought we were required now to bring it to the board.
Well, it requires approval by the local licensing authority,
Which is
whether
us.
you could defer that approval.
Could we delegate it, is what,
I'm not sure. I think we'd have to check that with the ABCC or with council.
Sounds like they want an executive approval. Read the language. But executive approval could be.
Right, but
we're
when
the
you- when-
licensing authority though, Pat, that's
Right,
what
yeah,
she's
when you
struggling
have,
with.
when an applicant comes in, like Novo or one of these others who may have outdoor seating or they've got to go before you, the legal hearing, the whole notice, everything else. And if you go back to the times that we had Dr. Faggio here, going back years ago, all the restrictions on the outdoor seating had to be a secured area, all those are in there. So what they're basically saying now is, you have to follow that procedure, but yet, if you want to address this modification just for outdoor service, you don't have to notify the ABCC.
Right.
So, I mean, I think the simplest thing is the board should just vote, somebody wants to do a quick policy on this, bring back a policy for the board to adopt, saying this is how we're going to adopt the outdoor seating in accordance with the new state guidelines. And then probably the easiest thing to do is to bring it before the board for a formal vote in the future. Because there's really not a high activity usage right now in the town. We have one, we've had one, which was, Max
So
and Leo's.
we can do that, and
Yeah.
then we're probably talking early June before it's done, because we have a one cycle
Right.
review, unless
Yeah.
it's simple enough that we waive it.
Well, you said we haven't had any requests yet. We may get one from Max and Leo's. And
Yeah, they did come in to ask prior to the expiration of the temporary legislation. At the time, we couldn't really answer what the process would be because we didn't even know if the legislation would pass. So I expect that they'll come in and request those extra, a couple of tables off into the parking area.
Okay.
So is it ABCC just gets notified if there's a change made?
Correct. So when there were a couple of other types of license amendments, like a change of DBA name or change of hours, that the ABCC currently doesn't approve. They just require notification if this board approves it. So that would follow the same process. Once the board approved a request for seating outdoors, our office would complete a certification document with the new description. We would amend the license, which would need to be posted and show all the areas where alcohol is served, and then we would send a copy of that certification to the ABCC. And they retain all of their typical enforcement authority and rights of appeal and everything else that they do for other amendments and applications as well.
So what we want to have is on record that if the ABC ever inquired, we could say, hey, the select board adopted this policy on X date in 2024, and oh, by the way, here's the application and approval for any particular establishment.
So we don't have to go through a public hearing.
You
So-
wouldn't have to do a
wouldn't have
legalized.
to, we could.
You could,
So
it's up
could
to
it
you.
go through an
It's whatever-
administrative review?
However you'd want to handle it.
Could it go through an administrative review at your office, and then you would just bring us the paperwork
No,
to
I think it would
sign,
come
or-
before you for a formal.
It would have to come
We'd
before
have
us.
to
I think it would come
vote.
before you to vote it,
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
as the
Yeah,
as
we
the
don't want to
licensing
give up all our
authority.
control. Okay, so I guess that makes sense, yeah, we can come forward with a policy, and, in the meantime, if we have a request, I mean, it would only be 4 weeks from now would be the time that it would be voted at the latest. If somebody has a request before that time, we can figure out how to handle it.
Sure, yeah, we can let them know that the process is pending.
Okay. Anything else on this? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a report this evening from Weston and Sampson about the PFAS sampling results.
Good evening. Paul McKinley from Weston and Sampson. Great to be here in person
to
for
see
change.
you.
Frank Getchell, also from Weston and Sampson, is going to be presenting a few slides. Paul, are you going to be flipping those?
Just tell me
Okay,
when you want to
perfect.
go to the next slide.
Just to set the table a little bit, so 54 Richardson, the DPW facility, PFAS, or these forever chemicals, there was a presumed release at the site. PFAS, again, also referred to as forever chemicals, is a suite of man-made chemicals. There's thousands of them. In this presentation, a little technical. We're going to focus in on 8 of these PFAS chemicals, and one of particular note is PFOS. So PFOS is one of particular note. So just as we go through that, please just make note of that. So just a few notes overall. Again, I'm here to sort of, Frank and I are both here to present sort of a status update on both the assessment and the remediation. As far as remediation goes, we installed a pump and treat system. It began operation on July 5th, 2022. So it's a great time here to come and give a check-in. We're about 2 years into the operations, and you'll see a graph of how we're doing. But 80 million gallons pumped and treated so far. So that's a lot. A lot of water. System's been running pretty much flawlessly, almost no downtime. And we haven't had any exceedances of the Massachusetts standards. Just a quick note on the standard. Massachusetts has what's called a PFAS 6 standard, and it's 20 parts per trillion. And what that is they've identified 6 key compounds in this PFAS suite, and lumped together, if their sum total is over 20 parts per trillion, then that's an exceedance. That's the current standard. So we're meeting that. It's basically been non-detect in the effluent so far. We infiltrate that down gradient of where we extract the water, and that's been having really some great positive effects. Frank can talk about that a little more. But so far, so good on the pump and treat. We'll show some graphs in a few slides here and show you the positive overall effects. So we monitor quarterly groundwater, surface water, piezometers that are installed in Cold Springs Brook, and we also, last couple rounds, North Chelmsford Water District allowed us to sample their individual wells as well, and we've got some data, sort of diagnostics there to give you some of those results. But the overall, the pump and treat system has really been doing its job in the area of capture. Everything's been decreasing out there for the most part in the area of capture. And again, we've got some graphs to show you that. One of our key wells, monitoring well 1, which is really what started this whole exercise, it really has decreased significantly. It's where we call the source area and where we've been treating from. It's down from a maximum of 1,417 parts per trillion. And then all the way down to our February result, which was actually 17, so below that current Massachusetts standard. So it's come a long way. Not all the wells have met standards. We've still got some ways to go. And unfortunately, the standard, our goal line might be changing shortly, but really come a long way, 14,000 down to 17. So in less than 2 years, great trend. What we designed for and what we're really looking for. So.
What's coming down the pike that you?
Over here, Paul.
What's coming down the pike that you're concerned about? Changes, you said?
Yeah, we can get into that a little bit, but I'm sorry, EPA just listed a few of the PFAS chemicals on the CERCLA sort of hazardous substances list, and they're publishing some risk-based values that are decreasing. So what they're going to name is a couple compounds specifically will go from, instead of a aggregate standard of 6 compounds of 20, there's going to be a couple individuals that go down to 4, and there's other changes that seem to be coming down the pike pretty shortly. Probably this year.
Are these the same, we're over here. Are these the same changes that we've discussed previously, or are these new changes?
Yep, no, these are the same changes that we've known these are coming for a little while, so we actually incorporated some of the system modifications that may, need to be necessary, right? So the standard's going down, want to be a little bit more protective in our treatment. We actually anticipated some of that in our current scope, so. This is a little bit of a busy slide here. It shows the site. And this shows a lot of actually some of the hydrogeology that we've been doing in conjunction with our sampling program. If you can see on the figure there, the yellow speckles is an area of capture, groundwater capture from our recovery well, which is right in front of the DPW building. I don't know, Paul, if you have a cursor, I don't know if you can put it on
The one by MW1,
right by MW1, yeah. So that's our recovery well.
you have to blow it up.
I'll blow it up, yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, it's the scale's getting a little blown up because now we want to encompass sort of the North Chelmsford Water District wells as well.
It's right there in the middle.
But if you can see on this figure, it's showing the capture zone of our recovery well, which again is right there where town manager is pointing to. So that's our recovery point, and groundwater has really been funneled into that point. We capture it from the speckles, sort of yellowy area there. It's called our zone of capture. Couple things to note here on this figure that, wide area, it's right in with our area where we think the release happened. What it doesn't encompass is the dog park. I know we had a question earlier about the dog park. Not quite capturing that. We can show you a little bit of the data trends over in the dog park. I think there's overall a net positive effect, and just to answer that question, we can go back and take a look at the groundwater concentrations and talk to DEP about the sort of risk of exposure. One thing about PFAS is a lot of the toxicity is from ingestion. So if we're using it to water the grass out there, it may not be as much of an issue as it is with the North Chelmsford Water District and people actually drinking the impacts. So we can actually go back to sort of get at that question that was raised earlier. We can certainly look at the data and the toxicity and see if watering with that impacted water over there would be acceptable and pose a risk or not. A couple other things to note on this figure. So sort of north of the area of treatment is the dog park area. Obviously to the left on this figure, to the west is the North Chelmsford Water District wells, where we have individual sampling results. Cold Springs Brook circumnavigates the site to the south, and Richardson Road sort of bisects this figure. There are a few wells. We term them 119, 120, and 21. I'll actually be referring to those, but that's indicative of groundwater quality as it leaves the site after injection. So just a couple of points here before we move on to the next slides. And Paul, if you could bump it ahead, that would be appreciated. Just getting into some graphs, some good old-fashioned graphs here to show the data trends. The peak at the top there, this is the MW1 right in our source area that I was talking about. Went from 1,400 down to that low point is in August of 2022, a month after we started treating. So you can see the precipitous drop-off of the PFAS 6 concentrations, and then it's been trailing off ever since. Continues on a downward trend, so really effective. The next slide, this is a really good slide to show the overall trends right outside the source area, and you can see these wells are decreasing and actually almost right at that 20 parts per trillion standard. So if you see, that's right at that line. And these wells, we term them as off-site shallow monitoring well trends. So these include the wells, the 119, 120, and 121, right on the side of Richardson Road as the groundwater leaves the site. And it also includes a couple of the shallow wells that are on the North Chelmsford Water District in between our site and the portable public water supply wells. So again, love this graph. It's actually, showing that the remedial system not only affecting the source area, but also groundwater that's leaving the site. And it's been trending, it's almost right at standards now, current standards. So really, the system's been doing, as designed, what it was supposed to be doing. Here, dog park area wells. So as I said before, this is a little bit outside of the zone of capture of a recovery well. And you can see the concentrations, certainly that 104 well, this is right in the middle of the dog park, it's been bouncing around a little bit. So I'm not so sure we'll be able to use that water for irrigation, but question is noted and we'll take back and take a look at it. And we call this out specifically. This is one of the concerns that DEP had when we were originally installing the system. Is it going to be, enough to capture all of the impacts on site? And one of the things, as Frank will talk about, some of the signatures and the sources of PFAS, we're not sure that it's actually the same as what we're treating over in the building. So maybe a few things going on here. It's not in our area of treatment, and actually maybe as a result of another source.
Paul, so MW 104 peaked and then it went down again. How much time do you give it before you say it's down?
Yeah, great question. I think we look at the seasonal variations. One of the reasons that we're out there sampling quarterly or every 3 months.
Okay.
Once we get a year's or more worth of data and it's not jumping around like it has been, I think we'll be safe to say that it's trending in the right direction and we can allay DEP's fears.
Thank you.
So again, this one, there's a problematic well or so, maybe a result of, again, either a different source and or not capturing it from the system. Here is a graphical depiction of the concentrations. We call this an isopleth map depicting the concentrations. Actually, if you bounce ahead, click ahead a slide. Unfortunately, it's not animated. We were having a jump from basically 6 months ago in August 2023 to currently, the most current data set, February 2024. And you can see the overall reduction in the plume size. So just a graphical depiction.
What makes it a plume? Is it over a certain?
Yeah, so what we have depicted here is that 20 parts per trillion standard. That's the
So yellow is over 20 parts per trillion?
White is over 20.
White is over.
Yellow, I think, is over 50. I can't see it, but it's a 50 contour. So that's showing the area. The yellow is showing the area that's where the PFAS-6 concentrations are over 50. Gray is showing where it's over 20, which is the standard. And just in the 6 months, the last 6 months, you can actually see the reduction. For those of you who've seen these presentations we've been doing them now for a couple of years, we're actually going to animate this. We couldn't quite get it together for this meeting, but we're actually going to animate like a lot of the quarters here, so you can actually see the reduction in size. But this is just the last 6 months. You can see it's really making a big dent.
You want to go back or you want to go forward?
No, I think we should go.
Okay.
Let's move forward.
Okay.
So Frank's going to take over from here.
So, as Paul was mentioning, obviously there's one of the things we've been looking at actually early on is the possibility of there
Frank, you got to get to the microphone or people at home
How's
can't
that?
hear you.
About there being other sources. That dog park well is one of the ones that we've suspected there may be another source, and it may not necessarily be an on-site source. It may be a source that's actually to the north. And obviously, with respect to North Chelmsford's concerns, one of the things that we've been looking at also, are there other sources contributing that have nothing to do with the DPW? Not saying the DPW doesn't have a contribution, but it may not be the only one. So Paul was mentioning, pretty much that whole monitor well network has kind of grown over time. And the reason is that as we started to establish the hydrogeologic conditions, there's actually 3 water-bearing units there. There's a shallower sand and gravel, there's a deeper sand and gravel, which are in communication with each other, and then there's the bedrock underneath it. When you flip over across the street to North Chelmsford, their well field, 4 of their wells are in the sand and gravel, and 2 of the wells are in the bedrock. And early on, when we started taking a look at the data, it looked like it was a little bit different, the PFAS distributions. So what I want to do is just concentrate some of the tools we've been looking at to kind of pretty much establish that, and I think to support that conclusion, where we go with it in the future, as more data comes in, the intent is to hopefully start to look at where these other directions are. Paul, could you? Okay, so these are radar plots, and I can't see them. So,
there's a microphone above you in front of that monitor. Right there, yeah.
Great. So, as Paul was mentioning, we've actually put together, these are a different way to look at the PFAS concentrations. They're called radar plots, and you can use them for different purposes. You can use them at a particular location to compare what happens over time. As these little things, do they shrink, do they grow, do they start to deviate where they are? These axes represent the current PFAS 6, actually PFAS 8 compounds that we've seen at the site. The 6 that currently are regulated by Mass DEP are on there also. And what will happen is over time they may change, they may stay the same, what have you. But it's a really useful tool for us to be able to see what's going on and to compare. So here's MW1. We like to call this the source well. as Paul's been mentioning, the system's been doing a really good job. So here is what the typical distribution of those 8 PFAS compounds look like, okay, when we first started on the site. And you can see what's happened over time. Pretty much all we're seeing over at MW1 is concentration of PFAS. So all those other contaminants, PFAS compounds, they're gone. They're not in that source. Now, part of that is the result of what we're doing is controlling with the recovery well. And so we're starting to pull stuff back. And this is a good sign. So it's an indication that the source area is clean. But we're going to come back to this later on because I want to take a look at this relative to what's been going on over at North Chelmsford. And then, as an example, these are some of the other monitor wells. There's 119, 120, 121. These are the ones I believe that are across the street. They give you an idea of the other side, so of Richardson Road. They're kind of beyond the recovery well. And what they do is they show the signature of the plume over there. There's very much a consistency in this area, the PFBA, PFOS, PF. If you look at how these things are set up, there's a lot of similarity to where this was here. This here is the treatment well, okay? And you can see, so we have the same source is what I'm getting at, you know, generally speaking within the footprint of the DPW area, the recovery well, and like immediately across the street over at Richardson.
Excellent.
Okay, now, if you take a look at some of these other wells, here is North Chelmsford. And if you notice, in terms of their water quality, and this is recent, we had seen something like this earlier on, but in terms of not the reliability, but the usability of that data, they would mix wells. So what we've done as part of the more recent work is we've actually individually sampled each one of their wells so we can get an idea of what the impact is well per well without mixing. Because when you mix things, potentially you can kind of, you know, trying to figure out what came from where. It's pretty consistent, all right? And if you take this here and take a look at it relative to our source area, our MW1, you can see it's a little different, especially with respect to some of these compounds like the PFBA, the PFBS. They're not as high as they are over at North Chelmsford. Also, this is now. So our source is already gone in terms of control-wise. And meanwhile, contributions, consistency of these PFAS compounds over at North Chelmsford is still there. We suspect that there is actually, when you look at the aquifer map, the DPW is just a small, it's kind of like think about the well field being in the middle of a river, okay? Most of the water that comes to that is coming from the west, actually, and it actually travels towards the well fields. That's the main part of the river. We're just a little tributary. And so as a result of that, it's not it wouldn't be out of what's expected that there's another contribution to what's being seen over there. I believe, Paul, can this come up a little bit? That's good. If you notice, as an example, one of the things that we did, I mentioned there's a shallow, and then there's a deep sand, and then there's a bedrock. One of the things that Paul's group had done early on when we went across the street to start putting monitor wells in, we actually put the wells so that they were in the shallow and in the deep. And there's actually different signatures between the shallow and the deep, which again supports this whole concept that there is another source that's impacting like in the Dog Park well, but also over at North Chelmsford. So it's not just the DPW. I don't want to go into more detail than that at this point, but that was one of the things we were tasked with, and it's one of the things that actually DEP recognized very early on when they were looking at some of these signatures. So what's been happening is, besides evaluating the effectiveness of the system, what we've also been doing is starting to set the foundation for there being other sources. Where DEP goes from that's not your problem, it's somebody else's, but the whole point is at least solidifying that. Paul, could you go up one more, please? I think there's one more slide. Yeah. And this is a surface water. Paul was mentioning about Cold Spring Brook. We have a suspicion that Cold Spring Brook, which drains over to the east, to the northeast, other parts of the town, not off of Richardson Road. It actually comes through the DPW and then goes over to the well field. Actually has a different signature, and the surface water there actually has elevated PFAS in it. Groundwater flow direction that map Paul showed earlier on is actually from the stream towards the DPW yard. So we believe that the stream is actually one of the sources that's bringing in PFAS from somewhere else. Unfortunately, we get impacted with it at the DPW, but some of it then continues over to North Chelmsford, and we know from other data, which I don't have here, but we have water level data that we've monitored. We know that these all respond when North Chelmsford pumps their wells. And so that means that they're actually kind of like our recovery well. They're doing the same thing over at the well field, and then they're bringing some of that contaminant there. So that, I think, is it for me, Paul.
Yeah. Go to the next slide. So just, I'll jump in where Frank left off here is just another look at the data signatures that we're looking at. Again, PFAS, PFAS are a suite of thousands of chemicals, a lot of them. We're focusing in on just a few specific ones that are indicators here. But of note on this figure here, wells 1 through 6 are actually the individual North Chelmsford Water District wells. And just what we've highlighted here is just, a plot of some of the wells, but you'll note here that there's another compound, this PFBS, and then this orange, I guess it's yellowish PFHPA, a couple different compounds. You'll note that, hey, why they're over here, but and also in these wells, these are MW114 S and D are actually on the North Chelmsford Water District. So we could sort of extend that circle a little bit. But what this is showing is that there's individual compounds on the North Chelmsford Water District that we're not seeing on 54 Richardson. So just another, we call this lines of evidence. We're trying to evaluate where the PFAS is coming from and a better way to treat it, but also looking at alternate sources. So just another indication on this slide, looking at the data, sort of presenting in a different way. One of the lines of evidence we're looking at as we complete the assessment to figure out where's the source and how do we get to a solution. So go to the next slide. Again, another way of looking at this. So as we were crunching this data, the relative percent of PFAS with PFOS. So again, this is the PFOS I mentioned right at the beginning of the talk. That's one individual compound that we think is a key indicator of the 54 Richardson plume versus what's at downgrading or potentially due to other sources. What this is a plot of purely, we just threw wells up here and asked them to plot wells that had greater than 50% PFOS, which is the signature on our site. And you'll notice here these wells, again, it's 119, 120, and 121, which are leaving our site. That's the groundwater quality that's leaving. But the rest of them, MW1, we have our influent concentrations from our treatment system. MW2, which is right in between the buildings as well. Again, it shows that the PFAS is a key component of the on-site signature versus, if you pull up the next slide, what we did here is throw the opposite. Let's plot wells that have less than 30% PFAS. PFOS, not the PFAS full suite. And again, you can see all of the North Chelmsford Water District wells fall into this, as do some of the piezometers and surface water locations, and a lot of the offsite wells. So it's just another way of looking at the data, which seem to indicate there are multiple sources. And I think we got a wrap-up slide here. Yeah. So I'll just speak over here. It's easier for me to see. So the pump and treat system, I think we covered that. The concentrations are have been decreasing over the last, I think we're at 22 months of operation. Really been doing its job. It doesn't cover the full site. So the dog park, again, is an area that we're watching closely. DP noted this to begin with, but overall concentrations are decreasing. Anticipate the standards, I think I hit on this earlier, but unfortunately EPA designated PFOA and PFOS, one of our key compounds, as circular hazardous substances, and we anticipate the standard will go down. This is a great check-in. We have a large report due to Mass DEP at the end of this year. It's called a Phase 2 Comprehensive Site Assessment. We're really trying to wrap up a lot of our assessment and draw some conclusions. So with that, let's take any questions.
Okay, any questions for Paul or Frank?
Well, while you're thinking of that, you're going to be sampling again this month, May?
May it is.
That was February day. So they sample every 3 months, and then it usually takes a month or so, 6 weeks or whatever to get the data. So we'll probably have data sometime late June or so forth. So we'll have more evidence at that time. And I think the other thing to note, as he's stated, and have probably been reading in the press, is the EPA has designated the stricter standards last month, and the Mass DEP, our state regulatory agency, is on board. They're going to adopt them statewide probably within a few months as well. So that'll be the new goal line, but the goal line is obviously significant change to 4 parts per trillion going forward.
Is it 4 parts per trillion for everything?
No, there's 2 individual compounds.
Okay.
I think they're going to 4, and then we're not quite sure how
Can we just like get a table that says, here's today's standard, here's where we are, here's where we expect the standard to go?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like our data today and
Yeah.
where so we know relative to where we expect the standard to go?
Sure, we don't quite know how DEP is going to interpret the EPA regulations. So states have to be at least as stringent as EPA. So Mass DEP, they have pretty sophisticated risk-based system. Not quite sure how they're going to adopt those rules. So that would be the one piece. We have to probably wait until those standards at least the draft standards get promulgated, and then we can do that comparison.
No, I understand. I'm just trying to say where we are today.
Yeah.
Right? We're measuring, let's say for one of them, we're measuring against 40 parts per trillion, and we have data that says we are falling in this range.
Yeah.
And then the last column is we think Mass DEP is going to this number.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So we know where we are relative to where the standard's going, since we know it's changing.
Yeah, no, absolutely, we can do that, and we also, again, I think I mentioned this before. We're running a remedial system, and we have to meet those same standards for discharge. So that's one of our also primary concerns, that we want to make sure that our discharge is meeting this new, more stringent, standard when it goes into effect. So we're trying to be a little proactive on both the remedial side and also the goalpost, right? We need to know where we're getting to. So absolutely, we've been looking at the data trends, and for some of those wells, I think I pointed out in the second graph there that we were actually getting close to our current standard, but then they're going to move the goalpost on us. So, how far they're going to move it and what's that going to result in time operating the system is probably where you're going with that. That's where we've been looking at this as well.
So, as an example, Paul's saying...
You got to get to the mic and nobody can hear you. Yeah.
Sorry. As Paul's saying is the PFAS 6, okay, those 6 compounds, the cumulative concentration can't exceed 20. The currently now adopted regs for the feds is that 2 of those, PFOA and PFAS, have to be 4 or less. And then the other ones that are in the PFAS 6, what happens is they've got an equation that you have to use what's called a hazard score. And so it's not straightforward like there's a number. And it's going to be based on the concentration. It's going to be based on the concentrations of the other 4 compounds. So it won't be...
So there's a formula that says what your level is?
Right. Now, that's the federal. Like Paul said, Mass DEP will probably either they can adopt that or come up with something more stringent. But when you're trying to compare, it's not going to be comparing apples to apples. It'll be difficult.
Okay.
And what this has done, the new federal standards, is water districts across the Commonwealth. We can forget about the rest of the country, but for our discussion, across the Commonwealth, some that were not previously had concerns with PFAS are now subject to it, and I think that's been reported in the media. And then the other thing is, how do you treat it? And I guess the question is we've seen the North Chelmsford Water District got a substantial grant. They're putting in treatment plants for PFAS and so forth. I guess the question I'd have is, would the current carbon filter system that's in existence for this facility, will that work for these new standards, or do we know that?
For the North Chelmsford Water District?
Yeah, because that's really the question that we have in this consideration is they've been using a system, as we know, that wasn't built for PFAS.
Yeah.
And it's carbon-based, and obviously that carbon media has to get replaced, and that's really been the driver of cost. And I guess the question that I have is, with the new standards, will that system still be effective to meet at least the new federal regulations as we know them?
Yeah, the way I answer that, we did have a sort of technical discussion, many months ago with the North Chelmsford Water District's consultants and their technical experts, and I think there may be other treatment technologies, like we employ resin out on this site, that may be, more efficient than carbon, is probably the easiest way to say that. So I think we had a really productive discussion with them, and we look at those kind of treatment options are available rather than carbon. So if that answers your question, I think there are other technologies, and they're still being developed. I mean, PFAS is relatively new in the suite of toxic chemicals that have been identified as an issue these days, and so the treatment technologies are always being developed. But even on our site, we've developed a carbon, with a couple resin chambers, and really the heavy lifting is done by the resin. So something similar or analogous might benefit North Chelmsford and help with their treatment and reduce costs.
And then last question. Obviously, what's leaving our site today doesn't meet the new federal standards, and we're just about there for the current standards. But it also indicates that your data saying that even if our site didn't exist, there'd be a PFAS situation that's occurring in that well field that has to be treated as well. Is that sort of your conclusion, is that you've got, from your sampling data, there's more than one contributing source. It's not limited to the DPW 54 Richardson Road site. Is that a fair assessment?
That's what the data, as we're into the assessment, and it was very helpful to be able to collect individual samples from the North Chelmsford Water District. But it looks like there are some differences in the signatures, as Frank was indicating with the radar plots, and sort of the bar graph plots as well show there's other compounds present in North Chelmsford Water District that aren't at 54 Richardson. So and Cold Springs Brook coming from offsite, there's certainly appears to be several, contributing sources, and so our lines of evidence, that's how we work on this. We develop lines of evidence between the hydrology, the signatures, straight up concentrations. There's many factors that go into it, but it seems to be pointing towards several sources.
The easy way would have been just to approach
They can't hear you.
I'm sorry. The easy way would have been just to approach it based on the chemistry. Okay, and then you just have that one line of evidence. And so you could just keep going back and forth. Well, you have the same thing as we have. But when you then look at the hydraulics, how the water levels respond to pumping, the gradient that's in that figure there, and all of that comes together, it puts together, it's not that simple, it's more complicated. And what you wind up with is not just the chemistry, but what we call the groundwater hydraulics work also to establishing other routes by which these other sources can impact their well field.
So this was from the February data. We also took data last fall. So can you remind me why we didn't do this from the fall date? We didn't do the report out from the fall data?
Oh, I don't know who the question was.
I don't remember what happened.
You sampled light in
You sampled
November.
in like November, but we didn't have this meeting
data
after
available.
that data.
Yeah, I think we were waiting for the 2 rounds. Like we don't like to draw conclusions on or hang our hat on one sort of
Okay,
hook.
so Paul just said we're going to sample again in May. So can we expect to get another report after May, or should we not have that expectation?
We can present on the quarterly data, but I will say we had 2 rounds for the North Chelmsford individual water sampling, which we did in November of 2023 and February of 2024. Just for ease of reference, we included the most recent, February 2024, which was generally very consistent with the November data. But we don't have another round from North Chelmsford planned, but we certainly do for all the other, the well network on 54 Richardson and Cold Springs Brook. Okay. So we're happy to come in and present on all the quarters of data and show progress as we go along. It's really just how the board would like to see it.
What were you suggesting we do to finish answering the dog park question?
Oh, so I will both consult with DEP and look at the concentrations at the dog park. So this is, I think you asked a great question, how many rounds of data before we think it's stable and are able to make that kind of conclusion. Is it safe or not to run the irrigation well at the dog park? And we can look at, even though the groundwater data doesn't quite meet standards over at the dog park, the toxicity is really due to ingestion. So if we're using it to spread and water the grass, that exposure route actually might not be completed. So something we can take a look at and see if it's permissible and doesn't pose a risk to turn on the irrigation well at the dog park, I think is the request.
And if I could add something to that too, along those same lines, is if you start to pump that well, if you start to pump that well, just like our recovery well, it can influence what's going on in the local groundwater. So the other thing that we have to look at is, are we going to be concerned about pulling something in if there's an off-site source?
And we did have that question posed to us before, and we looked at actually using the treated groundwater, which has been, it's clean, 80 million gallons of it, and see if we could, reroute some over there. The logistics of that are a little tricky, but and there would be an expense associated with that, but that's an option too.
Thank you.
So I'm just starting to learn about all this. How do you identify off-site contamination, like what's coming in and where it's coming from, and who does that? How do you identify it, and how do we go about figuring out where this is all coming from?
I'll go first, and then maybe Frank can chime in. Yeah, but this is really like the really what we're trying to get at with those radar plots and the bar graphs is looking at the chemical signature and determine, first of all, is there another source? Is it all attributed to one source? Is it multiple sources? And I think we're getting to those answers with that. Presentation of the data and the crunching of it, you could see that there's different compounds on North Chelmsford, and the way those radar plots plotted out, like the ratios between the different PFAS compounds, certainly indicate there's another source. So that's the second part of your question, how do you identify those and go about it? That's the tricky part, right? So we established sampling locations in Cold Springs Brook, so it flows from upgrading and off-site onto the around the 54 Richardson property. And I think as Frank was showing you on some of the radar plots, the signature that's even coming onto the site through the surface water stream are different. So, as we look at it, the dog park has a little bit of different signature. The Cold Springs Brook has a little bit of different signature. Some of the compounds on North Chelmsford have a little different signature. So that's where Frank was looking at both the hydraulics, the hydrology out there, where water is flowing, where the contribution to the North Chelmsford Water District wells and our wells are where that's coming from, and then trying to identify sources. So, looking at the immediate area, there's nothing really jumps out. It's a fairly residential neighborhood out there. So,
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions?
Yeah,
Okay,
we do
do-
have.
Yeah, do we have any
from
questions
Paul
from
Parvis
North
from
Chelmsford?
Water District.
yeah, would I be able
Yeah, go ahead, go ahead.
My name is Paul Pires, the superintendent up in North Chelmsford. I do want to thank Weston and Sampson for putting all this together. There's a lot of data. Got this just last week, and I'm just trying to analyze it all and put it all together. We do want to thank you guys also, Mr. Cohen, for inviting us out here to see this presentation. Very knowledgeable. Some of the questions that we have, and it will get into a lot of detail, but I don't know if this is the setting for those detailed questions. So at some point, we'd like to get together with everyone, all the parties, just so we can get into deeper detail. But one of the, I guess, the easier questions is a lot of the different sources or signatures that are coming into North Chelmsford. We have PZ3, I believe, piezometer right on Stony Brook on the top. Have we ever thought about moving further north just to see if there really is anything coming down Stony Brook? I think it's one of the things we've been testing for it since 21. Don't quote me on that. But it's something that we could look at and see if it's something that's doable. We do, through Mass DEP, we also have the Source Water Assessment Protection Program. We are going to contribute our time and help look into this. This is something that's affecting us, and since there is different sources, signatures coming in, we do intend to do some more extensive testing around the well fields to see if there is other things coming in from different areas. I understand I'm still relatively new to Chelmsford. I've only been here for about a year and a half, and when I got into this PFAS, you guys were pretty much in the middle of it. So it was kind of difficult to adapt it all and learn about it all in a very short time. As a superintendent, we do a lot of different things, not just focus on PFAS, but it is one of our main concerns that we do have up there to provide clean, safe water. I did bring my engineer also with me. She did have some questions about the plume and some other issues that were going on out there. If we're not going to take up too much of your time, but it's just some easy questions that if we could just figure out, if we don't mind.
Okay, I think we don't want to get into too much technical detail that will be way over all of our heads, but yeah, whatever you have.
Okay.
Sure, absolutely.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me? So I want to echo.
Just your name for the record.
I'm sorry, my name is Aurora. I'm the environmental engineer for the North Chelmsford Water District. And similar to Paul, I haven't been there for too long, but I'm trying to play catch up with the data also. And I want to echo Paul's sentiments and express my gratitude to both of you. Obviously, being in the industry, we know that there's a lot of work behind the scenes, just besides putting together a presentation. And as suggested by the board, I won't go into too many technical questions, but I did have at least 3 that I wanted to ask. If we could perhaps go back to the slide with the title PFAS 6 Source Area Decrease with Hydraulic Control, which was the plume. Thank you. I wanted to ask if you had calculated the surface area difference between the August 2023 and the February 2024 plume, seeing as the title suggests that it's decreased, but it certainly suggests that it has migrated. So I wanted to pose that question to you.
No, we didn't, but.
You gotta go to the mic again.
No, we haven't. But when you take a look at the August data and you see where the 20 PFAS pretty much border is, you can see is no longer any on the other side of Richardson Road. Groundwater flow direction, even if it isn't pumping, is going from the lower right to the upper left. And so anything on the other side of Richardson is no longer there. If you look at the 20 contour, you can see, and again, I don't have numbers, but obviously that's what we're basing it on. The other thing is if you look at the extent of the 50 parts per trillion, that's significantly reduced. And then if you notice there's a small red bleb, I believe that's 100, that's no longer there. So that's the type of information for the purpose of this presentation that we're relying on. But obviously with GIS it could be calculated.
Thank you. I'd like to move to the slide titled Key Takeaways, if you could. Thank you. There is mention of further analysis on the second bullet point, and I wanted to ask whether these results were included as part of this presentation, and if they were not, what analysis are they being utilized in?
So I put that up there. Further analysis is, the continued ongoing groundwater, surface water, piezometer monitoring, well monitoring, the system monitoring, which is key to indicate the concentrations that are coming in. But to Paul's point earlier, Mr. Perez, happy if we want to try and expand Cold Springs Brook and open to suggestions. I will say we had I think I alluded to before, we had a very productive, I thought, meeting with some of your consultants, and I'm happy to continue that discussion both on the assessment and the treatment side. So.
And thank you for your patience. I only have one final question. We mentioned the new EPA regulations and potentially more stringent Mass DEP regulations moving forward. And I wanted to ask how you plan to adapt your treatment methods to meet the new regulatory requirements.
I think we're looking at a 5th vessel. So right now we have 4 vessels out there. There are 500 pound treatment vessels. I don't know if anybody's been out to the Richardson Road system out there, but we have 4 treatment vessels. 2 are carbon, 2 are resin. Mass DEP actually asked us to reconfigure that. So right now, currently we're operating 1 carbon vessel and 2 resin vessels. I think we probably will add a 3rd just to be ultra conservative, make sure we don't have any discharge limits. And that was what we cost out and included in our scope. So I'm thinking I have to reach out to Ms. Clancy and Paul Howard, but I think we're looking to get that vessel online as a proactive measure, at least in place. We don't have to throw the valve on and operate it, but we're looking at a 5th vessel.
Thank you for your time. I appreciate the opportunity to speak.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. That's all we have right now, but we would like to continue some more detailed questions at some time. If we can invite everybody, we want to have to come down here or wherever, and we can continue this conversation.
Sure, I mean, that sounds good. I think,
sure.
Paul, you can probably
Yeah,
coordinate that.
Christine, and so forth. The only other thing I'd mention is there may be another source of data out there. As we know, the Chelmsford Water District has wells out there at Meadowbrook, and they may have sampling results from the brook and their wells at Meadowbrook, and so from the brook and Meadowbrook, and that may be able to acquire them since they're public record as well from the Chelmsford Water District, and that may also help give a bigger scope of the area that people have been inquiring about. So that should be something else we should be gathering at this time as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks for coming. We'll see you next time.
Christina, can you get George and let him know we're all set? Okay.
Okay, next on our agenda is a proposed revision to the Select Board's local initiative policy. And Virginia, you were the one that brought this up, if you want to tell us
Sure.
about your proposal.
So I'm going to start with the second one first. In section 6-2.6, there's a requirement that the developer provide notification to abutters not less than 7 days in advance of the public hearing. And this is what I had brought up a couple meetings ago. I'd like to suggest that we change that to 14 days. It's consistent with where there are statutory requirements. They give 14 days. I know we don't have a statutory requirement, but I also think it's in fairness to the abutters to just give them more notification to prepare and adjust their schedules. And then with that, if you go back to section 6.2, and I talked to Manager Cohen about this, the application materials are currently required to be filed not less than 2 weeks. And so my suggestion was to change that to 3 weeks. One, that would give more time to notice the abutters within 14 days. But also, it seems like that's a little bit sporty now, because for the department reviews, if they get the material 2 weeks, they really have less than 2 weeks to review it with the agenda cycle publication. So those were my two suggestions. And Paul, I just wanted to ask you, also in section 6.2, the second line from the bottom says changes submitted to not less than 7 days prior to the board to, again, facilitate review. Is that what you would want, or would you want to bump that out to, or does that work okay right now?
I mean, I think it's okay
Okay.
It doesn't happen all that often, and I think what we have been able to turn it around quick, but.
Okay. So then I would just leave it at those two suggestions.
Okay, any questions for Virginia about this proposed change?
And my only other thought, if the board wanted to, I know we have a policy to wait 2 meetings. These are such simple changes, and we've been getting a high volume of 40B applications in. I didn't know if the board might want to waive that 2-meeting period and just put this in place.
Yeah, I'm okay with that, although we've only had one lip,
We've only had one lip, right?
fortunately. I'm okay with that. I don't know how the rest of the board feels about that. Okay. So if we don't have any more questions, we can take a motion.
I will make a motion. I will make a motion to approve the proposed revision to the Select Board's local initiative policy as presented.
Second?
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next is the earmark request for the state senator.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Tomorrow, the Senate Ways and Means Committee is going to release its version of the Senate's FY25 state budget. We saw just over a week ago the House's actions in terms of the approvals of its version of the state budget. The earmarks that were submitted were included. Some were funding was reduced. but the requests were submitted. And so now the question becomes, the senators will have until the end of the week to submit amendments to the Senate budget, and then week after next, they'll act on the Senate budget, and then it will go to conference committee sometime in June, and since it hasn't happened in 13 years, ideally it's done by the 1st of July, but sometimes they'll do an interim 1-month budget and then have it done hopefully by the end of July, because they've got a end of formal session, and then it's also an election year. Long preview is we have an opportunity to submit an earmark to Senator Barrett on behalf of the town of Chelmsford. We don't want to duplicate what's in the House side, because oftentimes you'll sort of get the best of both worlds. So since all of them were funded, I reached out and spoke to Christine Clancy, our Public Works Director, and recognizing again that even though Senator Barrett would consider any request from the town of Chelmsford, we also know he's the chair of the Senate, Energy Committee, and is very outspoken on environmental affairs. So in speaking to Christine, she developed this proposal for a $75,000 earmark, and really is to address, the effects of climate change and environmental, but also have a concrete effort of new tree planting. So this falls in the wake of the tree committee, recognizing that the tree canopy is declining at about 1% per year over the last 10 years. And the tree committee did an inventory and management document on the town's tree canopy, but where this would sort of bring us to the level where a tree and invasive species inventory and management plan would actually document that and get it onto our GIS system. And what we're proposing is this initial $75,000 step is to do the town scenic roads, because under town scenic roads, one, they're designated scenic because of the significance of them, but also anytime you have an issue with a tree or a stone wall on a scenic road, it has to go to a public hearing by the planning board and so forth. So we identified the initial routes to be the scenic roads, as well as an additional 20 miles of basically major routes throughout the community that go through the town centers, the environmental justice area, which is up near Drum Hill off of Parkhurst, and then residential and commercial areas. So again, the end result would be a product that would be incorporated into our GIS system as a layer. It would have invasive species management and identify those areas where additional trees planting opportunities would take place with a tree management plan. And in fact, if you look at the earmark that Representative Rodney Elliott submitted for the tree planting, that would actually coincide with this, but would not be duplicative to this. And in fact, this work could be done in a matter of months. And so by the end of the fiscal year, you would have the plan done as well as the tree planting done probably next spring. So that's what we're asking the board to consider, is to submit this request to Senator Barrett and see where that brings us. And again, we would know by the end of this month, and then we'd just await the end of the budget process for what exists in the final stage. The good news, as came out last Friday, is the state got a bump in revenues unexpectedly in April. So the climate's a little more relaxed than it was, 2 months ago when they were sort of going through that streak of revenue shortfalls. So that's what I have for your consideration this evening. And if the board approves, I will, confirm this with Senator Barrett's office, and that way we meet their Friday deadline.
Okay. Any questions about this potential earmark? Everybody okay with it? All right, why don't we take a vote?
So are we authorizing the DPW?
No,
We just had the town manager to submit
Town
the
manager,
earmark
okay,
request
thank
to
you.
Senator Barrett's office.
Well, I'll make a motion to authorize the town manager to submit an earmark for the Senate's proposed FY25 state operating budget for a tree and invasive species inventory and management plan for the town of Chelmsford.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Next, we have a proclamation request from the to declare Municipal Clerks Week, May 5th through 11th. Everybody have a chance to look at the proposed proclamation, and I see we have a representative from the town clerk's office here if we have any questions for him about what's in this proclamation.
I'm okay with it, and I would be supportive of waiving the review cycle to issue it in a timely manner since it's this week.
Either that, we'd have to make Harrison wait till next year.
I'm fine with that.
Okay.
So do we want to,
George, are you
Does
okay
that work,
with that?
Harrison?
That would be great, thank you.
Do you have anything you want to add about it?
No, nothing in particular. Just thank you to the town manager and select board for enabling us to do great work, and for the other departments for supporting our operations.
so can we read the proclamation and present it to him now? Is that
Absolutely,
okay?
yeah.
So, in celebration of Municipal Clerks Week, May 5th to May 11th, 2024, whereas the town clerk's office serves as the professional link between the residents, the local governing bodies, and agents of government at other levels, and plays a vital role in the public's interactions with local government, and whereas the town clerk's office has pledged to be ever mindful of their neutrality and impartiality, rendering equal service to all, and whereas the position of the town clerk, a time-honored and vital part of local government, exists throughout the world and is the oldest among public servants, and whereas the town clerk's staff in the town of Chelmsford, Mass. Continually strive to improve the administration of the affairs of the town clerk's office through participation in education programs, seminars, workshops, and the annual meetings of their state, regional, county, and international professional organizations. And whereas it is most appropriate that we recognize the accomplishments of the town clerk's office, and whereas the week of May 5th through May 11th, 2024 marks the annual observance of Municipal Clerks Week, which is sponsored by the International Institute of Municipal Clerks. Now, therefore, we, the Chelmsford Select Board, do hereby designate the week of May 5th through 11th, 2024 as Municipal Clerks Week in Chelmsford, Massachusetts. We encourage all residents to recognize the contributions of the town clerk's office to our community with appropriate activities, events, and expressions of appreciation. Presented this 6th day of May, 2024.
So did the clerk seal her own proclamation?
There you go. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Harrison.
Thanks, Harrison.
Thanks, Harrison.
Okay, Town Manager Bid Awards.
Yeah, thank you. We have two bid awards for you this evening. The first one is for the strategic plan process. I'm not going to go through it in detail. You have the packet, but basically, in following the town meeting vote to fund the strategic plan committee was formed. The dozen people reviewed 7 proposals were received from the formal advertisement and solicitation that went out. From that 7, 4 companies were interviewed, and over 2 successive nights. And at the end of the review of the documentation materials and the interviews with the firm representatives, each committee member had a chance. We went roundtable to express their preference. And at the end of the day, the overwhelming preference from the committee was to accept the proposal from Berry Dunn. Once that was completed, we then opened the price proposal, because that's how a request for proposal works under Massachusetts procurement law. And fortunately, the price proposal for the Berry Dunn was $90,500, which actually was within our budget, and therefore gives us a little bit of cushion in the event something arises during the 12 months that it will take to complete the strategic planning process. I think, in Virginia, obviously, she may want to comment on it, but I think what I can tell you is the committee, as I said, it was an overwhelming consensus of ranking. I mean, we had good firms. It wasn't a no-brainer. There were many, of the 4 we interviewed, there were qualified firms. I think the focus of the committee was getting robust citizen participation, particularly from those who may not normally contribute to town affairs or town input sessions, and then also the output being that there'd be items that are measurable and in a document that actually, has defined outcomes and measurable and in a document that can bring us forward. So I'll pause there. I don't know if Virginia, as a committee member, wants to add any further.
I think you've covered it, Paul. Thank you.
So we can expect the final deliverable about a year from now? Is
About
that
a year from now,
correct?
yeah. The committee is meeting tomorrow night and then next week. If this is awarded, the RFP had a draft contract, so I've sent that, with the dates and numbers filled in to the company, and they've committed that they would have a representative at the meeting next week. And then the timing actually works out well because they'll sort of spend the next few months until sort of gathering the data, working with the committee, and then you're really going to see the big push probably post Labor Day when everybody's back in town and focused. And then that's when you'll get a lot of the public input and participation. And then the other thing I think you're going to see, because I was on a call last week with NIMCOG and Evan Belansky, there are other planning documents that are going out right now. Center Village has a master plan. The Open Space Recreation Committee is working on a plan. And I think we're going to try to see if there's a way to coordinate those activities so that, we don't confuse people. Like, oh, I already answered a survey. Oh, no, that was the center plan survey, not the master plan, not the housing production plan update, not the open space plan thing. So I think what there will be some effort to try to coordinate those activities going forward. But I think people on the committee is excited going forward with Barry done. And like I said, hopefully we'll have this done just over a year from now.
Okay. Any questions?
Just reading through the proposal over the weekend. So is this geared towards just a 5-year span? And then you would look at doing it again for the next 5 years? Is that how this is? I mean, because they
It's sort of a
mentioned 5 years.
It's a 10-year outlook, but it's really a 5-year action item plan because I think realistically, any items that you would do after 5 years are just too far out to do anything. But it really is sort of a 10-year outlook, but 5 years of measurable action items. And then you're right, what companies do and nonprofits and government would do is probably after 5 years, you'd come back and revisit it saying, okay, what have been our results and accomplishments over the 5 years? What's changed in 5 years? And then probably doing some kind of an update process in 5 years. Yeah.
Okay, anything else? Okay, I think we need a motion for this.
I'll make a motion to approve the town manager's bid award for the strategic plan consulting services from Barry Dunn as presented.
Second?
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you. And then the second bid award this evening is for Public Works. This is for the drainage studies, for drainage improvements. The Public Works did a bid opening on April 25th. There were 3 bidders received. This is for the drainage improvements at Roberts Field, Friendship Park, Ansty and Jesse Road area, and Mill Road near Ready Way. The low qualified bid, which was the low bid, was in the amount of $365,225 to Peter Amarello Construction out of Sutton, Mass. And I'd seek the board's confirmation of that proposal.
So I have a question. So this was issued in as just one bid, is that correct?
Yes, yep.
Okay. Any questions? Okay, we'll take a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the town manager's bid award for the DPW drainage improvements project as presented.
Second?
Okay, a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And appointments.
Yeah, I'm seeking the board's confirmation this evening for the appointment of Lisa Maroney as Human Resources Director. As the board's aware, next month, our Human Resources Director, Jean Pazziali, will be retiring after 30 years of service to the town. Process here was we did a formal bid advertisement process, used the MMA and the HR listservs. We received applicants for the position. Reviewed resumes. On the town's part, at the interview table was myself, Christina Bruce in my office, and Jean Parziali. We conducted interviews, and at the end of it, we all felt that the best fit was Lisa Maroney. Lisa doesn't have the HR background, and other candidates did have an HR background. But what we were concerned about and what we're excited about is we think Lisa's the right fit for the job. This is a different job, and quite frankly, I was surprised that I didn't recruit her. I was surprised when I heard that her name was submitted by Jeannie when the deadline had closed. I went in with an open mind. I think from two perspectives. From Lisa's perspective, it does two things. One is it provides career advancement and an opportunity to further develop herself. Clearly, the HR position and director is a higher responsible position. Obviously, it's got a higher pay range than that, so it offers career advancement. It also provides new learning skills for her. And quite frankly, I think it also provides her with career stability. What that's saying is there was a concern on Lisa's part, and I think there's a concern out there, is if things continue on the trend that they are, we're seeing communities, having to carefully decide what positions they keep going forward. For example, the town of Dracut has already given notice to their economic development director, business development director, that position will be eliminated. We've seen a vacancy now arise with Tingsboro, where the person from Tingsboro went over to Bedford. Eric Salerno took the job in Bedford, and we don't know what Tingsboro's do going forward. And I think Lisa's concern was you're sort of the old inventory thing, last in, first out. I wasn't at that point. I had not had a preconceived notion that, a year from now, I don't know that Lisa or that position would be with the town. But what I did see from the town's perspective is, and this was sort of confirmed to me by the reaction from the employees when they learned about it, was an excitement because she has shown herself to be a hard worker. She's shown herself to be discreet and insensitive to people, and I've seen that, and I think that's one of the most valuable things that happens with the HR position is you're dealing with retirees, spouses, at often challenging points in their life in terms of dealing with either benefits for health care or death benefits. You also have issues of also recruitment and so forth, and as well as cases that come in from active employees, whatever their concerns would be. The HR is a direct contact person if somebody's having an issue with the department head and so forth. And I think those personal qualities, as well as her diligence and work ethic, is sort of what crystallized for me, but not only me. When we finished up the interviews, I didn't say anything. I said I wanted to hear from Christina Bruce and from Jean, and they had the same conclusion. And so that gave me confidence. And then we sort of kept it under wraps until the agenda went out. And then when the word got out to other department heads, I was out of the office at the time, off-site. I came back a few hours later, saw Lisa, I saw the emails that came in, and it just showed me that the expression of appreciation and support for her was beyond normal. And I told her, I said, Lisa, I think that should tell you something. It should comfort you, because I have no doubt that if Lisa wanted to leave here, she could get a higher paying job doing what she's doing in the public sector or the private sector. But I think this is what she wants to do. It does. I think it also provides more personal contact, which is a little different than in her role as business development. And so I think it just works for her, and I think it'll work for the town in the years ahead. So with that, I seek your support for this nomination, and I just think the measure that we have, whatever we're hiring, and we're in a challenging hiring period. My philosophy is don't force a hire, and the big thing is organizational fit, and I think this one is right there. So I respectfully seek your confirmation for her appointment this evening.
Okay, any questions for Paul?
Yeah, a couple. Your last comment sticks out big with me because I've operated my business that way for 35 years, in as much as you got to find the right fit. So that makes me feel better that everybody feels like she's the right fit. I was concerned. I was one of those people concerned because I don't see any human resource experience. And I know enough about it to know that there's a pretty big learning curve to come for her, I would assume, because of legalities and laws and things like that. So have you discussed any kind of training?
Yeah, let me get on to that learning curve thing. Because what's happening now, if you look at MMA and municipal publications, because there's a shortage of employees and qualified employees, what we've seen in the last 18, 24 months because of the labor shortage is a stepped up training thing. So believe it or not, this Thursday out in Northampton, there's the Mass Municipal Human Resources Association, which is part of the MMA as an affiliate, is actually doing a boot camp for newly hired HR directors. And so Lisa will be attending if you confirm the appointment, or if you table it, I'm still gonna send her until you decide. But the bottom line is that's a good resource. I've also encouraged her to join the organization and to network, because that's one of the keys is, you have the back support of myself, who've been doing municipal government for 35 years. You have Labor Council behind you. But a big resource is your networking and your skill sets out there for in this case, HR. And you're seeing it regularly, because whether it's municipal finance and other positions, and you just see it regularly, because right now we just have a shortage of qualified people. So I'm confident that those training resources are there, but more importantly, not only are they there, I'm confident that she's going to apply herself and develop those skills. So yeah, I think that really will be successful.
Good. How many resumes did you get?
7.
Wow. Really?
You believe that? Yeah. It's just telling. We had a situation where we're still looking. I think we'll be going on to our 4th iteration, trying to find a procurement project manager for Public Works, and we just can't find anybody. And we've interviewed, and we've walked away from some people saying, no, this isn't going to go well. And then we had one person who we thought was going to start, but then didn't show up. You have those type of experiences. But the problem is just like in private sector, the labor pool is shallow, and it's just amazing what you're seeing out there.
Yeah, we see the same thing in business. So, almost set.
Okay, anybody else? Can we have a motion?
I will make a motion to approve the town manager's appointment of Lisa Maroney as the Human Resources Director.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Thank you.
Okay.
All right, the next one is Colonel Moses Parker School Building Committee. What you have is a template letter in your packet, and what you see in the meeting binder. This letter is actually provided to you from the MSBA. This is how, I don't know if you use the word rigid or structured, or this is the new way that things are done. That column on the left under description is what they provide, saying this is what you shall put on your school building committee. And so therefore you have to have the local chief executive officer, a school committee member, superintendent of schools, local official responsible for building maintenance, representative authorized to construct school buildings, school principal, member knowledgeable in educational mission and educational facility, local budget official or member of local finance committee, members of the community with agriculture, engineering, and/or construction experience, and then the all-inclusive other. So in other words, you basically got to have these 11 positions, and then you can go beyond that. So I sat down, had discussions with Jay Lang, and said, Jay, a lot of these are pretty self-evident, superintendent, manager, facilities director for the town, and so forth, and then a school principal. And then we sort of said, okay, well, Jay, who on the school committee wants to do it? In this case, it's Dennis King. And then for the local budget official, I approached Jim Clancy because one is he has children in the schools, and certainly as chair of the finance committee, he's demonstrated his capability. And even if someday in the immediate or near future, he decides he no longer wants to do finance committee, he's rooted in the community with 2 young children in for this project. So he willingly took on the school committee, the finance committee seat on that. Jay wanted to add the director of business and finance, Joanna Johnson Collins. She's on there. Spoke to Pat Maloney, who obviously Pat is the one who has experience in doing the previous school projects as well as other municipal projects. So we slotted him in. And so that's the configuration. We have until May 31st. And then the other individual you see at the very top is Brendan Kelly. He is MCPPO, which is Massachusetts Certification of Public Procurement Officer certification. He's a town resident. He's also the Director of Facilities in Lincoln. He went to the presentation the school committee did in March on the new school, Parker School, and after that meeting, he introduced himself to those who were in attendance. He sat with Jay. I know he's spoken to Pat.
He's also got children.
He's also got children in the school. So we're mindful of that. You want to have people who are vested in the community, who have children in the schools if possible, and then basically you also have to tell them who the chair is of the committee. And in speaking to Jay, I think the at this point the obvious one based on his previous experience would be Pat Maloney. And then what will happen is this will evolve over time. I mean, this is a 6-year project, as we heard at town meeting, as we've been aware of this thing. We can add or modify over time, and I think you will see changes over time, just naturally from attrition and otherwise. So again, I'm seeking your confirmation for this appointment. The deadline is May 31st to do this, so I welcome any edits or modifications. Jay will also be discussing this with the school committee tomorrow night. I think the philosophy was there are still people going to be involved with this project who are going to be, involved and actively involved with this, John Souza and others. But I think in order to have an effectively sized committee in terms of quorum and those type of things, that I think the size of 12 is how we kept it. So that's sort of where we're at this point.
Okay, any questions?
You might have just started to address it, Paul, but from the finance perspective, like I see Joanna Johnson Collins is on there. However, whenever we roll up capital funding or, funding for buildings and maintenance, it's really John Souza's organization. So my question was, where does that come into play here? And should John Souza be on this list? Because they typically do the heavy lifting.
Yeah, he could be. I think what our immediate focus is, I'm saying this project has 2 phases. You've got the phase from now till the ballot vote to approve this project in whatever form and cost it is. And what this process prescribes right now is not really heavily finance focused. We have to do this project eligibility, and where it goes after this, we submit our building committee, that part's done. What's next up on the docket is enrollment projections, which the school committee already has from NESDEC, and then we got to do maintenance reports to demonstrate to the state that we've done our maintenance and that of our facilities, and that we're qualified to go forward. That'll help our ratings for feasibility. And then feasibility again is going to be out in the community, which will start next February. Okay, here, as Jay explained at town meeting, Dr. Lang explained at town meeting, do you want a middle school of grades 4 through 8? Do you want one of 4 and 5? Do you 5 and 6? Do you want one of 4 through 6? Do you want one 4 through 8 and so forth? It's all the conceptual stage. I'm not opposed to putting John Souza. If you want to add John as a 13th, I'm fine with it. John will be involved, but I think John's perspective would be just the debt service and the numbers perspective. He doesn't have children. His daughter has graduated from the schools, and I'm not opposed to him being a member of the committee, and I'd welcome it if the board prefers that. I'm just trying to keep the size manageable. So that's where I'm at.
I'm sorry, Pat. It says for the school building committee. So I guess you said this is for the initial phase, but what's the longevity of this?
Oh,
committee?
it'll be for the project.
Right.
But what I'm thinking is going to happen over time is there'll be additions and deletions from this core 12 or 12, 13, whatever you have. One is, and Jay and I have spoken, we'd like to have a municipal official of the town who has MPC, public procurement official certification. Right now, we don't have anybody in school admin or DPW who has that, so that might be an addition that comes in. Then we would slot perhaps Mr. Kelly down to the other category, because that's really a procurement function. I think that other things that will happen over the next 6 years, you will see a number of these people no longer in the position, whether they're elected officials or they're appointed officials. But the duration of the appointment will be for the project. But what I'm saying to the board is you are going to see the composition of this committee evolve over time, just because 6 years is a huge duration.
And so every time it changes, you have to go back to the state and come back here?
Yeah, we have to notify the state. So we come back here for any changes, and then we submit it to the state. And that's how it will play out. So again, if you'd like me to add John, I'm sure he'd do it.
I think if John's okay with it, I'm okay with it. That was just kind of my question. I'm okay with not having him if he's okay with not being on it, but it just struck me as an omission. And I guess the only other thing I would say, Paul, is I absolutely get what you're saying about getting people involved who have kids in the school system. I would also just ask, keep in mind, I think that as this process progresses, there's a whole nother community out there that we have to get buy-in from, who don't have kids in the school system.
Probably a large majority of the town, if not two-thirds of the town. That's no question.
So from a perspective standpoint and like doing the roll-up-your-sleeves work, I get it. I just would make sure we don't put blinders on to the rest of the community that has to buy into this.
No, the cost is going to be a community concern, but I think where it would be helpful is when people evaluating, is it
these are
4
concept
through,
evaluations
these are
and
concept
things like that.
Should it be 4 through 6? Should it be 5 through 8? Should it be, I think we know where the school committee's leaning as we sit here today.
Right,
they want to free up the space, but I think it would be helpful. I think we were mindful of people who had children in the schools who could give direct experience towards that.
Thank you.
So is it 11 voting members and then Joanna, or are we?
No,
she would
No,
be
you'd
voting.
all
It'd
be
be 12.
voting
It'd be 12.
members.
We can add John if you
Then we
want.
should go to 13.
Okay, we can
Because
go with
should
John.
have an odd number
Okay.
if they're going to be voting members, because
Okay.
what the list.
I don't know if that's so critical, but yeah, I know what you're saying,
Well,
yeah.
Yeah.
I know what you're saying,
It
but
could be
still.
overly cumbersome if we ended up with 13 or 15 or 17 people on a committee. It'd just be unwieldy at that point, in my opinion. So my
You're
understanding
already at
is.
12.
Huh?
I said you're already at 12, right?
I understand,
Yeah.
but we also, reading the regs and being familiar with the regs, we can do an 11-person committee and add as many non-voting members as we'd like for consultation or anything like that. I only get concerned, the more voting members that you have, the more unwieldy it gets to get to a decision.
And we saw that in Lowell. What happened with Lowell, if you saw some of the media accounts, is they had people who didn't attend the meetings, they had problems getting quorums, and I think that was sort of.
And that's my concern,
was
and
a
I saw Bill Ricca with 16 people on their committee, and it took a long time to get things done, and consequently, town folk got, frustrated, MSBA they got their job done, but the other thing that I heard from the chairman over there was that, we had a building inspector on the committee that didn't live in town. We had all these other people on the committee that didn't live in town, and they're voting our thing. So we're not in that situation at this point, but we don't want to get in that situation either. So we do have the option to limit it to the amount that they spell out, and then add non-voting. So I think probably you and Jay may want to have a discussion about that, but I have no problem adding John and Joanna Johnson too.
Okay. So I guess the question is whether you want them to be voting members or non-voting. We can go 11 plus 2, or we can do 13, whatever the board prefers.
I think it should be an odd number, so, and I believe John should have some involvement, because he's gonna be generating a lot of the information that we're gonna need to get out to the entire community, to Virginia's point, because it's not just about one group, it's about getting out to the whole community, and John's gonna take a big part in that, so I don't have a problem with that at all.
I mean, I don't know everybody on this list, but most of them, and my gut says you're not going to have issues not getting a quorum with the people. I mean, these are committed individuals, but my other comment is, if you wind up in that spot, it's time to change committee members. We don't have time.
So maybe it's better to go with the 13.
I mean,
and then this way, if people
that's what I would say,
get
and then if
attrition,
you-
then you still have some institutional memory from the beginning.
Yeah.
And I guess to the comments we've heard, I thought you and Jay already pretty much, did this pretty, comprehensively as far as who you decided to put on here.
Yeah. But no, I'd be glad to add John to the list and then go with 13. That's fine. And then that way you got a 7-person quorum, which
Yep.
is fine.
And is there something else that's missing here? After the paragraph at the bottom seems to imply that it should be something else.
Oh, yeah, there's narrative you got to add,
Oh, okay.
providing people's background. But but we just wanted to get the committee appointed,
all right,
and then we'll
gotcha.
provide the narrative.
So, okay, it's not going to go in just like this.
Yeah.
All right.
So
Okay.
again, I would seek your confirmation of the list as presented, plus John Souza, our finance director.
Okay, we have a motion?
I will make a motion to approve the list for the school building committee for the Colonel Moses Parker Middle School project as presented, but with the addition of John Souza.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. All right, town manager reports.
Yeah, just a couple of quick items to keep the board and the community up to date of what's happening. And the first one has to do with the North Chelmsford Fire Station facade update. I don't know if you want. What I presented to you is the slide that just shows you where this is going. Basically, the committee has received the input from architects, engineers, had discussions, from an initial site visit to a meeting down at Public Works last week or so, and the direction is to go to a metal panel cladding with banding, and you see that illustrated here in the gray, which was the request from the committee in terms of what would look appropriate out there. And I don't know, Pat, if there's anything else you want to add to what's going on out there.
Yeah, just to give you some background, so, and this was going to be part of my liaison report from Permanent Building Committee, but in essence, anybody that's driven through North Chelmsford in the past year has seen staging outside of the building. We had gone with a brick facing on this building when we completed the project in '22. That brick facing was falling off. We've had good luck with other projects in town with the brick facing, school admin, et cetera, but this was done during COVID, so who knows what reasons we had for the latent defects that we experienced. So we went back to the contractor and said that, we have these brick falling off, and so they wanted to do some remedial work that we didn't think would satisfy. So I, as the OPM, had recommended to the committee that we may think about that. So they went and did some work and came back and said, no, that wouldn't be acceptable. So we did talk with our legal counsel. We had a meeting with the contractor. Contractor agreed that this was a latent defect and that they should be responsible for replacing the siding here. So we have now sent this document to the contractor. We're waiting for word back, but basically they just asked us to stay in a similar square foot cost as what was there. We think that is this. We don't want to go back with brick with them because we've been there and done that, and we don't think that's a good idea. So this was what we thought was a reasonable solution. So right here, right now, the Permanent Building Committee did vote to go with this look, And we're just waiting for Triumph of Littleton to get back to us and say that, yes, they will go ahead and take this on. And as soon as we hear word, we will, if they're ready to go, we're going to turn them loose and hope to get this done by midsummer, and July 4th being a target date. But it's getting a little late for that at this point. But hopefully we have something this week.
Okay, any questions? All right.
And then the final part of my report is we received the annual letter in accordance with state statute regarding the underground utility project from National Grid. As noted, there have been no expenditures, obviously, in the last year. There's roughly $3.3 million remaining in the account. The surcharge was turned off years ago. It's been 11 years since the project phase was done. We had hoped that we might be able to move in some manner or form, and we were actually considering, and we're going to bring before you whether to use some of the funds from National Grid and to approach Verizon to do Chelmsford Street, because that's going to be redone from the center to basically past Fletcher, past Alpine Lane to the highway to Golden Cove Stedman in I think 2 years on the tip. Unfortunately, Mass Department of Transportation, basically has provided no support, and including financial, towards an undergrounding project there. To refresh the board so that's now sort of pushed aside. To refresh the board and the community what the challenge is. The goal and the directive was always to go through the center, past the Oddfellows building, past Fishbones, to the library underground. The problem is the Verizon trunk lines that are there to go under that brook and up, putting aside whatever contaminated soils might be there from the cleaners and everything else. But the bottom line is it's in the millions of dollars from Verizon. And the problem with Verizon and why they bailed out of this project is because they're collecting less than $100,000 per year in any availability of a surcharge, because they're only allowed to assess a surcharge on landlines within the community. And so again, we're stuck in this quagmire where we can get the work done for National Grid, but we just can't get it to Verizon, and it's the two factors. One is the trunk lines that go through the center, if you've ever looked at what goes through that center, and two is the brook and the undergrounding that would involve trying to go underneath that brook and then back up. And so again, we're at this junction of how do we proceed. There is no provision in the statute on how monies are returned, because those monies were paid years ago. I imagine they would just distribute it to the customers if that's who are here today, if that were the direction the town ultimately decides. The only other means to do it would be to find another funding source. And what some communities have done is they have utilized community preservation as a funding source. I'm not suggesting that, I'm just informing you that would be another funding stream that could support this type of a project, because again, the variant is the funding source under the state law that provides the Verizon funding source to be landlines. And as we know, landlines are gone for the most part, and they're not coming back, and that's what's hindering and hampered this project, which is why we did the first phase at the Common, and basically we're stopped there because it took Verizon, I think it was 4 years to collect the deficit from that, and that cost doesn't even approach what it would be to go through the center into the brook. And then the other problem is trying to go above ground out of the center, saying, okay, don't bury them, go, you can't just, the costs are prohibitive to try to go, just get down Summer Street or that other, it just doesn't work. It's just a cost constraint. So that's where we're at, and it's, again, wanted to update the board, and perhaps when we do our goal setting, we can tackle this again in terms of what do we do with this. But I'm not looking for an answer tonight, but I just wanted to let the board and provide the board with the annual report from National Grid. So that concludes my report, Madam
Okay,
Chair.
thank you.
So Paul, if we wanted to bail on that, so if we said we're out, we're done.
Yeah, I think
the funds would just
How would you decide who gets them back? You
Well,
can't.
I think we would.
I'm just trying to.
Yeah, I think we'd have to. I think we'd have to ask council and basically I think there'd have to be some determination. Maybe go to the Attorney General's office saying, what do we do in this instance where the town has a significant surplus? How is it returned?
Yeah,
I think
because you
the
can't
AG
just
I think the
refund
AG
it to the landline.
No. There's nothing for the landline Verizon. It's all the National Grid people.
Yeah.
Right. And then what do you do for people who are on solar? I don't know. But I think we'd have to see guidance from the Attorney General's office in terms of how would you do this, or get some kind of a special act of the legislature, to govern the distribution, because there is no language in the statute about what you do with excess funding.
And then, so currently, this is in an interest-bearing account?
Yeah. And the problem is you can't use one's utilities for another. You can't say, oh, we'll take some of the National Grid money and apply it to Verizon. They don't allow you to do that. There may be some shared costs, like if you're opening a trench and so forth, but you can't sort of use electric money to pay for telephone utility stuff. So that's how it works, unfortunately. But, so I think in the weeks ahead, I mean, I can continue trying to get some effort from the legislators. But again, I think the issue is the funding source. And Verizon has, been adamant that they're not going to fund something that's got a 100+ year payback period for them to recover their costs. No, and again, the only thing I've been able to see out there, these projects aren't very common these days, but the only thing I've seen is in recent terms is some communities did look to community preservation as a funding source, because again, this Verizon problem, landline, is the constraint.
Okay, we have 3 sets of meeting minutes to look at this evening. I guess we could just take them all together. Anybody have any comments, edits about any of them?
I have one amendment.
Okay.
It's for the April 22nd meeting minutes. At the bottom of page 2, the second line of the last paragraph says, she also told Board Member Timmons that she would correct the list of employees to provide the first and last names. I had submitted a correction that didn't get in there. It should say that she would correct the list of supervisors in section 10C. They're not employees. This was in
okay,
that
I remember,
application, so I would just like to amend those minutes to include that correction. And Paul, I can just give you this if you want to give that
great,
to
thank you.
James.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, we have a motion?
Do we have to do them separately if one of them is amended?
No, just mention that.
I'll make a motion to approve the meeting minutes of April 4th, 2024, April 8th, 2024, and April 22nd, 2004,
That one with amendments, yeah.
with
as amended,
amendments, and the others as presented. This one?
You have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
I do that.
Okay, thank you.
And I just have an announcement about the determination of the releasability of executive session minutes. The minutes from February 15th, 2024, segment 2, can be released. Okay, we're to liaison reports. George? Okay, Pat?
I pretty much gave my report just prior here, but Permanent Building Committee, we had, they're looking at redoing the siding at the fire station up north, so we're waiting word on that. And then they put together a budget for the fire station study that they've turned over. And that's what I can tell you what's going on with Permanent Building Committee.
Okay. Erin? Virginia?
The final Square Committee met on April 23rd, and they had some really good participation in that meeting, and they wanted to thank the residents that joined that meeting. They're going to be scheduling a public input session this summer to discuss the status of the Vinyl Square Improvement Plan. And if there are any residents who want to be added to the Vinyl Square Committee's email distribution list, they can reach out to Joe Tierney at joseph.tierney4@gmail.com. The North Chelmsford Water District is going to be continuing to flush the flushing on Groton Road and Main Street this week. And then the following week, they are moving on to Dunstable Road. And their schedule for hydrant flushing is on the website. And then I just have a question. I was noticing news blurbs for Sudbury and other communities that it looks like they're starting to assign people to think about next year and the 250th anniversary of the American Revolution. And I didn't know if that was something we were giving any thought to, Paul, or it looked like Sudbury appointed a committee, and I know it's early, but I just thought maybe we ought to start
I know the
thinking
Minutemen
about-
is going to be their last year of marching to Concord.
So
I'm not aware of, I don't,
maybe it's something for a future agenda or thought,
Yeah.
or,
Okay.
but it is next year, and
Yeah.
It could be in our goals.
it could be in
Yeah.
our goals too.
okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. So I have a few things. First, the Chelmsford Friends of the Library, thank everybody who came to the book sale a couple of weeks ago. They earned over $16,700 from the sale of used books, so that was good. A couple of weeks ago, we had a ribbon cutting for a bench at the Warren Pole Farm. It's a really nice bench that was made from plastic bags, recycled plastic bags, and it was, I think, something definitely needed there. There was no bench at Warren Pole, so now there is. Congratulations to new Chelmsford Police Officer James Hartshorn. He graduated from the academy last Friday, and he was sworn in today, so you'll soon see him out on patrol. Condolences to the family of Jim Murray. You remember Jim?
Skipper Jim.
Skipper Jim, yeah. Yeah, he passed away recently, so he will be missed for sure. And I just wanted to note, at our last meeting, we went through our meeting schedule for the upcoming meeting, and one of the things on there was the municipal open house, which we had set for June 10th. Unfortunately, the library did not have the library available for that night, and the only day in June that the library was available was June 12th. So I reserved that for our municipal open house. It has changed the date. That's a Wednesday. I hope people can make it. I know there's a lot going on, especially usually on Wednesday. So I've already heard back from 6 or 8 different committee chairs that will be there, and the library has offered to adopt this program as their own. And so they will help with outreach and publicity for it. So that'll be really good. I mean, not that we won't do any, but they have a much bigger database of users and patrons than we do. So hopefully that'll be a good event. And we'll hear more about that as it gets closer, but June 12th. And that's all I have. Do we have another motion?
Make a motion to adjourn?
Second?
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.